You are listening to Filthy Armenian Adventures, a travel agency for the soul. And this is your host, Alec Mohibian. Today, we will open a portal to that stage of history known as the Red Scare. Our guide is Leslie Fiedler, and the three monumental essays that open his first book, An End to Innocence. His Chambers and the Age of Innocence, originally published in 1950, Afterthoughts on the Rosenbergs, originally published 1953, and McCarthy and the Intellectuals, originally published 1954. From the preface. Indeed, I feel just a little misrepresented by a first book so largely political. I think of myself as primarily a literary person, though one whose interest in works of art is dictated by a moral passion rather than a cool technical concern. And I do not hesitate to admit that I write of politics reluctantly, in a world where to ignore them would mean to be less than human. I have no expert knowledge in political matters and am an indifferent researcher, but I have lived, deeply though somewhat grudgingly involved, through a crisis in liberalism which seems to me a major event in the development of the human spirit. This crisis I feel peculiarly qualified to describe precisely because I am a literary man, immune to certain journalistic platitudes and accustomed to regard men and words with a sensibility trained by the newer critical methods. It is a close reading of recent events that I should like to think I have achieved, a reading that does not scant ambiguity or paradox, but tries to give to the testimony of a witness before the Senate committee or the letters of the Rosenbergs the same careful scrutiny we have learned to practice on the shorter poems of John Donne. I asked my friends Jack Mason of the Perfume Nationalist and the writer Ben Braddock to read these three essays for a bull session on the legacy of the Red Scare, to ruminate on how familiar the narrative tactics and the characters are to our own time, where communism has shape-shifted its way back into power in American minds and institutions, and history must be falsified at breakneck speed to cover up the consequences, the crimes, and the complicity of our most empathic liberal friends in those crimes. Just as Mr. Fiedler shows us history was falsified in what we now call the Red Scare.
The word is about, there's something evolving. Whatever may come, the world keeps revolving. They say the next big thing is here, that the revolution's near. But to me it seems quite clear that it's all just a little bit of history repeating.
Well, he also describes their behavior, and the behavior is that it's the exact same as what he's talking about. And this book came out in 1955. That liberals cannot believe that someone of the liberal persuasion is capable of wrong. That the liberal per se is always the hero, always on the right side of history. And that, anything they might do that's against the law or just, against decency or morality, that these are somehow in service to this greater arc of history that they have decided that they're on the right side of. It's like a weird perverted form of Calvinism, of being of believing that you're just part of the elect and that you're just kind of automatically one of the chosen ones.
The mandate of heaven. Liberals have that.
Yes.
That's why they're so successful at what they do. Conservatives don't have it, and that's why conservatives fail. And when conservatives win, as we have been winning since 2024, they immediately think it's a mistake and feel guilty and worry about being considered mean. Liberals don't have that problem at all. But
and liberals they have this because it's this delusional self-belief, but then you have someone like Trump who actually does have the mandate of heaven. Like there is a literal miracle that happens in Pennsylvania when he turns his head at precisely the right angle to get
Right.
grazed instead of horrifyingly murdered in 4K. And then even then, this is not enough for for the cattle to just simply accept, okay, there's a miracle. Maybe we should just like trust, that God has a purpose in this man's life and just, trust him as a leader. No, it's just the constant backbiting, undermining, and sniping that happened since then. It shows that like conservatives have kind of the same problem as liberals, but in exact reverse. And it's like,
and most of the conservatives in
yeah.
our scene are communists anyway, and they only very briefly disguise themselves as something else, but they're completely communist. They all came from the Bernie Sanders camp and identified as communists a couple of years before. So
Right. So they take
that
this
explains a
old,
lot.
yeah, they take this old communist thing of like when they're on the left, believing we have the mandate of heaven, and then like when they pose as, being on the right, it's the exact inversion of believing that they have the mandate of hell. And it's just constantly looking for proof that they're being somehow betrayed or whatever by our beautiful president that God himself has shown that he loves.
Well, to normal people, to the vast majority of the population, there's no world in which the word communist means anything bad. It just
Correct.
doesn't. Like
Correct.
the proof of all the murders and what happened in the Soviet Union and all of that, it doesn't make any difference. It just doesn't.
It's real communism.
Yeah,
Has never
They're
been tried.
groomed and educated in a certain way that anything left wing does not have the sensational ring of evil to them that anything Nazi does.
Yeah, and Fiedler touches on this. I mean, he says that the liberals cannot imagine that even the radical progressive, i.e., communist, is really bad because all of them are just believe that okay, anyone on the left is just incapable of doing anything bad, and like evil only comes from the right. Therefore, like if someone on the left could do something and they could just, even if it's the most horrible crime on earth, they could just say, well, it was a mistake, but
they don't even
they didn't do anything.
They don't even
wrong.
have to say it was a mistake. People now in the
they don't even acknowledge
post-COVID
at this
world
point.
have zero emotional reaction to the reality of murder or violence. They're completely desensitized to it unless it supports their political preconceptions.
But in the 50s, when there was still like a little more residual grounding in the Christian, heritage culture of America, at that point, I think there was a little bit of, acknowledging some wrongdoing. But we're now so far removed from that heritage that it really is, like you said, there's just no acknowledgement whatsoever that there's anything wrong with any of the monstrous things they do.
Well, they didn't acknowledge much back then. I mean, it takes a man of total honesty, like Leslie Fiedler, who describes his own identity as a liberal, and therefore his own complicity in the illusions of liberalism in the first half century, which included a complete blindness to the horrors of the Soviet Union. Like there's two types of people basically in the liberal side of the equation. And one of them are the people who recognized the evils of the Soviet Union through many different stages of revelation, and there are those who didn't, and who simply like shape-shifted their way out of that recognition, or who recognized them when it was at the latest point, which is 1956 Khrushchev report. That was the latest point where they could no longer deny it because the Soviet Union itself confessed to the crimes of Stalin. in that report.
And
so
that's an important date too, because like this came out a year before that in 55. And so
right.
Fiedler was doing something really brave and transgressive, which was defending Chambers in liberal intellectual circles. Like, for him to go as hard as he did, given like the sort of context of his milieu and just like the intellectual situation at that point in time, and this is like before the Khrushchev report. You get an early taste of like, okay, Fiedler's someone who just calls the balls and strikes, no matter whether it's good for him professionally or not.
He provides a really great explanation of the workings of the media and of academia and intellectual thought in the Rosenberg chapter, by describing the division between the first version of the Rosenbergs, like the reality of them, which before anyone really cared about it, before it had been co-opted as this left-wing cause, and the media creation of them, which is totally absolved of any crime, lacks any consistency whatsoever. It's just it becomes a snowballing invention of the media, and it bears no relation to the actual people that no one cared about before was politically useful.
And we've seen that real case versus fake case thing play out over and over in all these
January 6th.
George Floyd, the Daniel Penny, the gap between what the real events are. The gap between what the real events are that they have these happenings over and that they turn into these celebrity causes. It is never like they are never chimping out over like something that their stated explanation for chimping out is never matches the actual set of facts or whatever on the ground. And it's uncanny. And it was interesting reading about that because it was a reminder that this goes back. Like this is a very long habit. It's easy to kind of make the mistake of thinking that the era that we live in is unique and special. But
because there's no one there to tell you that this has been going on for decades and decades, except Rush Limbaugh, who is dead. Because the current crop of conservatards certainly don't. Even the best of them instill any sense of history. They focus on circular current thing cycles. They're completely goldfish brained, stuck in the moment in which they exist. And in order to be effectively turned into a conservative, like for life, you have to understand the full scope of how long this has been going on. Because otherwise, like we saw with all of these fair weather Bernie Sanders friends, they get a little interested for a minute in the idea of conservatism based on a couple of current issues, like the tits being lobbed off of the transgender children, or vaccines, or something like that. But then they don't have the structural understanding of what's going on underneath it. So they don't know where to go when things get too hot for them. So they just retreat to being a liberal, which is what they actually understand.
Yeah, for me, it was like freshman year of college, reading Atlas Shrugged, this really old novel. And this is happening, with the dawning of the Obama administration, and being able to see all the exact same archetypes, like in my college, on TV, all of this. And that was like the big moment for me. Like, okay, this is something that goes incredibly deep for a very long time. Because I was
the most
thinking,
effective. Reading Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead is the most effective way of educating people on what a communist actually is spiritually.
Yes,
the shape-shifting reality of that collectivism, not just the face of it, which is this like political party that existed at a certain point in history. But once you understand through her descriptions of it in prose, just that element, you see it everywhere. And just that instinct for herd conformity and how it is weaponized.
She does such a good job of getting across what the real motivations of these people are, not just what their superficial thing is, which is always, cloaked in the sort of, concern for the poor or feminism or whatever else. Like, she gets to the heart of it, like what makes these people so disgusting and corrupt at the core.
It's like almost an inborn thing, which I pretty much believe is that I kind of believe people are born libtards, and
it kind of reminds me
to
of
a
how
certain degree,
Steinbeck
and they can't be
talked about
changed.
like Steinbeck talked about how, just as some people may be born with physical deformities, like some people are born with sort of spiritual deformities. And I think that's basically what leftism is.
One of the really fascinating parts of this story, which Fiedler brings, most directly to light, it's kind of the point of his essays here, especially on the Rosenbergs and on Hiss, who, by the way, I'm going to play a clip of Hiss from 1970, Hiss was a liberal darling to the final day. Whittaker Chambers, you guys have to read. Well, I'll help you. I will do an episode after this where I just read excerpts of Witness by Whittaker Chambers, which is a book everyone should read.
Incredible.
It should be
book.
assigned reading if you want to have any understanding of American history. I say that as someone who hadn't read it until December, because I figured I already knew the story, and I'd read David Horowitz's Radical Son is basically the second half of the 20th century what Witness is to the first half of the 20th century. No matter how much you think you know, it's still vital to read that book to truly understand what it meant to be alive at that time, to believe in communism, to realize it was evil, and to try to make amends for that in your life, and to try to save America from its influence, which is what Whittaker Chambers did. It's an immensely powerful book. He was basically a martyr. He basically killed himself. In fact, he tried to kill himself during the trial, and he tried to save Hiss. He got into the most trouble himself because he tried his best to save Hiss from the worst charges, which were outright espionage. And for all of that, his reward for all of that was an early death, being absolutely torn to shreds by the liberal media, and for decades after, really even to the present day. But thankfully, the liberal historian Sam Tenenhouse, when he wrote his biography of Chambers, vindicated him for the liberal audience. But for decades, Hiss was considered, because Hiss got out of jail in like just 3-4 years later.
Yeah, he was welcomed back with open arms.
He was welcomed back with open arms, and you hear in this 1970 BBC whatever interview of his, you can hear the smug, dripping contempt with which the mainstream media treated Whittaker Chambers. You can hear it in the way they described his theatricality and his oafishness and his fatness, and the fact that it was like there was the communist playbook for disparaging your enemies, or discrediting your enemies when you're caught red-handed, was repeated and echoed by the mainstream Western press through the decades, as it is today, to everyone who disturbs the agenda. But it'll really drive the injustice of it all home if you read Chambers's own testimony in Witness, and what he was trying to do and what he did ultimately at the cost of his life.
This is a really good time of year to read it too, like in the lead up to Easter, because there's some passages in there that are very they're very like Easter like, with the crucifixion and all. In fact, I think he even talks about how everyone ends up hanging on their own cross. It's a really beautiful passage, but he's a fantastic writer.
Oh, he's a great writer. Yeah. I mean, he was writing all like these like cultural pieces for Time that were super popular, because he was working for Time after he left the Communist Party. Yeah. And he was writing like unsigned. He wrote like a lot of their most popular essays about religion, about literature, about all these things, kind of for the general audience. It's a very long memoir, but the chapters are super short, and it's all very dramatically and lucidly told. It still took me forever to read it because I was just so affected by it. I was reading it in December before Christmas, And I was just so like emotionally affected by every little twist and turn because not because literally me, but because I get it. Like I get exactly what he was going through. I know exactly everything he describes, the feeling of being completely alone and of depending on the unexpected wink and nod of sympathy from a random stranger or from, Henry Luce now and then, like just when you're about to kill yourself from loneliness, from the loneliness of being alone in history with this immense burden nobody understands because, as Leslie Fiedler describes, the age of innocence, American innocence was not equipped to understand the communist threat. That's how they infiltrated so much. And we did not infiltrate at all, as far as I'm aware, in the Soviet Union. I mean, there were
all of the people we thought we had there were double agents. In fact, like we didn't know that the Soviet Union was going to collapse even like 2 months before it actually did. Like we thought that they were, militarily stronger than ever, and all this, like all the U.S., all the Western intel assessments were just that. Yeah, these people are really strong. It's going to be a very long time, whatever.
And that was immediately rewritten. Yeah, that was immediately rewritten to, they were crumbling apart. The Soviet Union never had a chance.
It's kind of like what I guess we're seeing right now with Iran, where all the assessments were that they're this really powerful regional power and they'll sink a carrier on the first day or two of the war. And like, there's all this stuff. I had read all of those assessments and last year in the lead up to Operation Midnight Fury, I was very nervous about it. And then we went in, we did it, we bombed their nuclear program to smithereens, and then nothing happened. And then I was just like, oh, this is like the Soviet Union all over again, where we just totally overestimated the power or whatever. But there's another thing from Chambers. I have it on my mind. There's this quote that from Trump from the last few months that I saw being mocked, but he was saying that communism is thousands of years old, and they're trying to do the fact check thing of no, it's 100 years old. But there's this great Chambers quote about how communism is not new. It originated under the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When the devil told Eve you shall be as gods. Right. Mm-hmm. And so identifying this thing, it's been around for a very long time. And
it's the fantasy that you can make heaven on earth.
Yeah.
And all the delusions that are downstream of that fantasy and all of the self-deceptions that are required to prop up that fantasy. And as Chambers makes abundantly clear, and one is free to disagree with this part of it, but in his view, the only way to defeat communism ultimately from winning the 20th century was to replace it with a faith in Christendom. And that's the thing. That was his big kind of larger argument, which is it's not enough to simply reject communists as this or that, as foolish young people, whatever. They had a unshakable faith, which could only be fought with an equally unshakable faith, or at least an equally powerful faith. It couldn't be fought by the kind of wishy-washy in-betweenness that liberals at the time and to this day kind of typically embody. His view was that you're outnumbered. You're kind of outnumbered spiritually by communists if you don't understand why communism is evil. And also, it's he does a good job of communicating early on in the book why people became communists at the time, which is that there was a crisis of history following the Industrial Revolution. And we do have a crisis of history on our hands today. It's not perhaps as brutal, but it is a crisis of history, namely that people are, human beings once again are becoming redundant and useless and digitally, if not also demographically replaced. And people don't know how to handle that. I mean, we millennials have experienced this firsthand, like in real time. The crisis. It began seemingly innocently with a little recession, and it deepened and it deepened and it deepened. And as trivial as it all seems, when you look at one little part of it versus another, it's not trivial at all. People are lost spiritually. They're not having babies. I mean, that's as a crisis gets. Like they're not functioning as adult human beings until they turn 43, if at all. And the kind of insanity that we've dealt with in the last 10 years, it's almost an insult to equate it with the committed faith of the communists of the last century. It's much less of a commitment. It's much less conscious. It's like just this subconscious self-melting into a easily manipulable little putty that
people are looking for religion in everything, everywhere. And they have these malleable, fried, weak little minds that can be filled with anything as long as it doesn't have much substance. So the defining kind of archetype of the 2020s has turned out to be this sober AA fitness person who is obsessed with food additives, who has newly discovered some, usually trendy Catholicism, Christianity. And what they want is rules, rules, rules. Everything to be guidance and rules. And it betrays this like really depressing insecurity. They also have this kind of superstitious like Neanderthal view that if they punish themselves enough for sex, then like the rain will come or like they'll be saved in some way. So the whole defining tone of the 2020s is everyone like wishing for this like punishment for sex that no one's having anyway. Just because it's been perhaps a few decades since there's been a big sex panic compared to the scale of what we're dealing with now. They're just looking for guidance and leadership and religion in literally everything. And they, for the most part, cannot find good information, and they don't trust their own instincts. They lack confidence. Even though socializing has been, and like public social life has been totally eradicated and destroyed since COVID, everyone still must answer to their social connections for everything that they do through their phone. Just weak people.
Well, we're also on the
Very
precipice
sad.
of this entirely new, just like taking it to another level with the peptides, right? The like injecting yourself with tranny hormones of some sort, but it's like we're not even sure if they're hormones. They're supposed to be fragments of protein. It's like it's not enough to be neurotic and have like 20 different types of supplements you take. You have to actually put the needle into your body to get the real like psychological placebo effect of whatever this is you're putting in, and smashing yourself in the face with a hammer because it's going to make your jawline stronger or whatever.
All of this stuff under the umbrella of fitness and health influencing and alternative health and all of that, it's going to be extremely embarrassing in the future when a proper tastemaker describes it in a way that people can mock and digest after it's safe to do that. It's incredibly embarrassing to me now. It's having experienced years and years of it on Twitter and seeing how these food trends take hold and they're adopted sort of semi-satirically and then taken seriously and then abandoned. And it's kind of all for nothing, yet it has a religious seriousness about it. And the fitness obsession which is obviously this reaction to everyone's sedentary lifestyle and like the lack of sex and lack of public life and loneliness that everyone experiences. The fact that that's gotten to this like hyper customizable, like high tech thing where it again becomes like a substitute for alcohol because like after people quit alcohol, they get so into the fitness stuff that they start like taking testosterone or something that also like impairs their judgment, which they then have to quit. And it's just like
Yeah, and they
every
go.
it's a cyclical thing of like
Yeah, they do the
getting into
running club.
addiction, just
Yeah,
wanting your own
yeah.
like decision making skills taken away from you with literally any substance.
Well, it's like having to constantly go through the cycle. You know, you take up the running club because you decide that you don't want to be bulky, you want to be lean, and then it's like, okay, well that messes with your joints, so you do yoga, and then you find out yoga is inviting Indian demons into your body, and you shouldn't be doing that, and so you have to like go find a whole new other thing to do. But I think the thing that is sort of broken it, at least in a mimetic sense or in a spiritual sense, is like the at least just like the insane neuroticism over looks maxing or whatever is
Oh God.
the hockey team, the American hockey team, and their beautiful defeat of the perfidious Canadians.
Yeah, the
at the
communist. Yeah,
Olympics.
their first upset over a communist hockey country in
Yeah.
45 years, 46 years.
And you get this handsome, beaming, half Jewish, half Catholic New Jersey kid who has like 3 teeth busted out. And, you know, and he looks better than anyone who is, you know, being just very neurotic and precious about their appearance.
Than anyone on the Elena Velez runway.
Yeah. And it's because they're young, vital, white men full of cum, and the cum is what is needed to cure civilization.
And
As
they're
I said years and
competing
years
at-
ago, it has to be cum specifically. It can't be this woman-centric, like woman-worshipping type of feminized sexuality that Big Straight wants people to participate in. It has to be a defiant, cum-filled erection, a male sexuality, an unapologetic quality about male sexuality that is not about, you know, buying into this conservative thing of you're a bad little boy, don't touch your pee. Like, you know, that's not going to work. Society needs male vulgarity.
I think this is why women are so upset about the war, because war fundamentally changes relationships between the sexes in a society. And I think that some of the women just kind of feel their power slipping away as we enter a new war. And, you know, things have shifted into the phallic. You know, you have these missiles slamming into concrete.
Well, no matter how
the constant pounding of the air defenses and of the bunkers and whatever.
Well, we here know that no matter how conservative a woman professes to be, at root, they dislike anything that men are doing on their own, or any refusal of their governance or turning things into a kindergarten that they can govern.
Well, especially if like something is going on that is drawing men's attention away. So like, you know, monitoring, you know, men love monitoring the situation during warfare, during like seeing what kinds of planes are flying, all of this sort of thing. And so that's, you know, less time that they're going to be spending, you know, simping or whatever.
Building the nest, contributing to the female nest.
They're less available to have their vril psychically drained.
It was especially gratifying to see this happen in the Winter Olympics, which are basically the Women Olympics, which is the one athletic. And I know, Jack, you're not into sports, but if you've noticed, figure skating is a big female thing. Figure skaters make a ton of money all year round because they have like Saturday night figure skating, which is basically just dancing on ice with judges holding up signs. And women are really into figure skating and all the jibber jabber and subjectivity of it, and including women who hate sports. So the Winter Olympics is the attention it gets is focused around figure skating. And the fact that a male sport once every half a century intervenes in a manner that involves the United States upsetting a communist country is very gratifying to witness. And I'm not even a hockey guy, but it's very symbolic, as Ben said, of a certain kind of male rebellion and revolt from the femocracy we've been living under. And
hockey is an extremely violent sport. And
yeah,
it's like,
it is.
what really annoyed me is like people feeling the need to mention like the women's hockey team that had won a couple days earlier. I mean, I guess it's okay if they want to play hockey because like this is how I guess you breed the elite hockey athletes for the men's team. But the thing is, like, you don't. It's less enjoyable to see like women fighting each other, and I don't think that happens that much in hockey. And like the whole point, everyone knows the point you go to a hockey game is you want to see like people get into a brawl.
There's no stakes to the woman version of things. Like women do, there's no stakes. It's just like an imaginary little world of lesbian entertainment.
Yeah, it's like women have figure skating,
forced upon you as equal.
Which is forced upon you, and you have to kind of pretend that it has stakes, and it doesn't.
Yeah, and the idea that like certain sexes, like men have their sports and women have their sports, and like there's a complementary nature to it. Like there's obviously biological differences, and those manifest in the manner of the sport. The fact we still can't accept that basic thing, and we have to shove everyone into the same ones and just be like, oh look, they got they beat the Canadians too. It's like, okay, cool, but just this like thing of like, okay, well, is the girls team going to come to the White House?
Well, that was the funniest thing is when Trump.
But the way that had to overshadow the boys in their big victory. Right. Like when the women won, were they going around asking like, well, what do you think about the men's match? And, it's like, it's these female athletes just, they love climbing on a soapbox and, screaming about how like, why am I being asked this question?
They have to ruin everything they have to invade every moment of glory that a male is seen experiencing. They have to make everything about themselves. They have to equalize everything. They cannot just sit back and let the boys have their moment. It's just like this in
men
every
are not
sphere.
allowed to have an achievement at all.
You just can't. You have to like just swoop in and make it all about you. It's like something we've lived. I've lived through this in many worlds, but the sports thing in the 90s, if you were playing sports like I was, wholeheartedly, in the 90s were peak. Women are just as good at sports as men. This thing, which was codified into law under Title IX, one of the craziest. I mean, it's only because it's in sports does it not stand as like one of the most absurdly communist laws in the history of the world. To insist with scientific faith, by the way, like it sounds crazy now because it eventually the myths upon which it were based have been debunked and nobody talks about it anymore, really. But when I was growing up through high school, it was insisted to me by my teachers that it is wrong to say that men are better at sports than women. It's objectively false. They thought that literally objectively. Women and men would be equal one day, and the only thing that held women back were lack of resources.
Well, it's like
this is kind of like insanity.
They were teaching that the only actual biological difference in race was just the color of the skin. There's nothing other than that. It's all bring up things like sickle cell or whatever.
But there's the racial delusion. However, obviously, cope it was at all times. There's at least you can understand the desire to hope that it's not true, and that actually if you give it enough resources and if you give it enough time and you give enough culture, it can make up for I get that innocence, let's call it, way more than I get the innocence, the sheer like hysterical obtuseness that requires you to ignore the reality that men are physically more capable and more interested in athletic competition. It was
Well,
just so
this is
insulting.
culturally ingrained from 60 years of feminism to the degree that people, even conservatives, don't know what a waste of time this is and how much it has shrunken everyone's brain, shrunken education, shrunken public discussion and discourse. Just the built-in systemic overrating of women's achievements in every area of life and how much time that takes up, how the entire history of cinema, which was, made by men, invented by men, all of that was done by men. The only thing anyone knows how to discuss now is the achievements of women, because this is how we're all taught in school,
Well, and
even
you can't
in
discuss
millennial
the
school, you're only taught to look at something and say, how is this good or bad for women? Where are the achievements for women? And so that's the only way that most people even think about anything, is like they look at it and see, how is this good for women? How is this good for women? And it's fucking insane. They've never stood back and realized how completely insane that is, to look at every aspect of life and only think about how it's good for the achievements of women.
And it's just so small souled. It's like,
well, the great
imagine
irony
being
of like trying to discuss women's achievement in cinema is the woman who achieved more in cinema than anyone else. You're not allowed to mention her name. So
Yeah.
well, that's par for the course. I mean, that even if it wasn't, even if that woman wasn't working for the Nazi regime, and if she was just in the United States of America being very fiercely opposed to the Nazi regime as well as a communist regime, she also is whitewashed from history as in the case of Ayn Rand and others.
Yeah, correct.
So
Margaret Mitchell,
it's like
all of them.
it never, it always, anything that's too inconvenient to the communist lie, blah blah of the moment.
Well,
is
it's
going
actually
to be,
it's actually any of the real achievements, because they completely mog every like these women that they're trying to hold up as these exemplaries,
Right.
no one's ever heard of or whatever else. So it's like the women who even actually achieve something, it's like there's this weird resentment against them. And it's usually I think it's usually because like they don't fit the mold of the kind of woman that they want to be a high achiever. Like they're
no, it's because they're
too
not meeting.
eccentric.
No, because they have to. They know, they sense, if they won't admit it, that what they're ultimately trying to do communistically is even the playing field with mediocrities. And if a woman achieves fame and notoriety and success by being great, she's not helping the mediocre crusade.
Right.
She's not doing anything for the
Right.
mediocre crusade, because she's showing that actually anybody can succeed in America if they're great.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah,
that's
because
the
she's
deal.
doing
Like,
it. Yeah, she's doing it in a male, quote unquote, male dominated industry, a patriarchal industry, et cetera, et cetera. So she is showing that you don't have to implement communism in order for women to flourish. That like the exceptional women actually do really well in our existing system.
right.
Leslie Fiedler, to go back to Leslie Fiedler, he excels at dropping the most insane references to literature, often melodrama, 18th century stuff, soap opera type stuff, into all of his writing very unexpectedly. He was obviously the biggest influence on Polya in the iconoclastic points that he makes and the way that he writes. But this, from the McCarthy part, he makes reference to East Lynne, the original sensation novel by Mrs. Henry Wood, which is a favorite of mine. Does McCarthy on the one side, the State Department, the Democratic Party, and international communism on the other, a threatened America between. This is our modern East Lynne, a melodrama, but about who's the hero, who the villain, we cannot agree. Played over and over with an almost mindless persistence and lack of variation in the newspapers, on the radio, on television. The names and dates change, but the meaning of the play is always the same. The conspiracy exposed, the liberal revealed as camouflaged communist or understrapper of the communists, or alternately as the traduced innocent, rounding on his tormentors in all the radiance of his virtue. Sitting in the same playhouse, the two audiences see two quite different plays acted simultaneously by the same cast. John Carter Vincent, Owen Lattimore, and Philip Jessup, and Edward G. Posniak, or Theodore Kagan, or in the end, one can no longer remember who was in the title role. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's definitely the ground. He's definitely the what do you call it? Patient zero of the Polyan style, the Polyan kind of synthesizing style, where he can whip in like fierce cultural critique with literary allusion and a vast knowledge of culture.
Another quote of his that rang like really relevant currently is he had this line said, "There's no political act that is not marred these days by the obsessive envy and anguish of the Europeans in our regard."
Oh yeah, the middle portion of this book is about Europe and his like travels to Italy and stuff, and he has some important stuff in there too. Specifically, actually, I took note of one of those because he's there describing the way in which like the liberal myths that were hatched up in America were especially about the fictional case of the Rosenbergs was just, you know, accepted smugly by everyone in Europe because they had so much guilt about how far they went, you know, up to World War II in their atrocities to each other, that they had to find a way to even the score somehow with America, and which is the source of anti-Americanism, you know, post-war anti-Americanism that lingers to this day. Although I don't think it's nearly as.
And this you still see the Europeans will still believe like the most absurd libtard version of any event that ever happens. It's pathological, like, you know, it's like their only frame on anything that's happening in the United States is the MSNBC. It's like that tier of kind of register, and I guess a lot of these things kind of had gotten smoothed over hidden, but then the whole tariff debacle last year kind of brought it back to the forefront on the panic-an thing that has run deep in Europe for decades and decades.
Right.
Yeah,
it can
Trump
be
is
inflamed.
They pretend they don't know how to ship stuff now. Since I order perfume from them all the time, all those fucking frogs, they'll email you like claiming they like you'll be like, I don't care, I'll pay the tariff, and they'll just email you literally mentioning Trump and act like they don't know how to go to the post office or wherever to ship something internationally. Like the technology doesn't exist.
Yeah.
They're insufferable.
Even where the communists played only a secondary role, there was evident in the shrillness of the cries of horror rising from countries where only a little while before the lynching of political enemies was considered an act of virtue, a desire to celebrate the fall of America from innocence, to indulge in an orgy of self-righteousness at our expense. There is no political act, and the simplest cry for clemency was inevitably a political act, that is not marred these days by the obsessive envy and anguish of the Europeans in our regard. If the Europeans could only have believed as firmly as they pretended that we had utterly yielded to hysteria and persecution, the balance of guilt that tilts so annoyingly in their direction would have been righted, and they might have loved us more, not less. But they could only want to believe this, not really credit it, any more than they have been able to really accept the stories of germ warfare in Korea. So this is just another reason why these myths have kind of proliferated all over the Western world. It's like they wanted, and he's analyzing there, that they wanted to believe that we really wronged the Rosenberg. We executed two innocent people, but they can't actually believe it. They don't actually deep down believe it. So it's not. They're you know, if they actually deep down believed it, they would feel sorry for us for being just as bad as they are. You know, that kind of thing.
It reminds me of a German friend who, when he found out like the extent to which we had killed the American Indians, he was kind of relieved because he no longer felt that Germany had a special guilt around the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
real.
that evening.
It's very real.
It's the evening of the score. It's like a way to assuage the guilt by.
And the flip side of that is, the flip side of that, which is one of the earliest lessons I've learned from political sociology, whatever. And I learned it from Eric Hoffer in a few of his aphorisms. It's that nobody will ever forgive you for doing wrong to you. Like if someone does you wrong, that is the most unforgivable. That is the one thing they can never forgive you for, because the guilt of that is something nobody wants to handle. So never expect someone who has wronged you to feel guilty about it and to take the guilt upon themselves. The guilt will always be pinned on you. And what they're going to do is frame you with imaginary crimes to even the score. Yeah. So that's what happens. And it sounds like a hoity-toity, highfalutin idea, maybe a little bit. It's not. when you see it, when you
see it happen, like and it's like the more they wrong you, the more they have to build you up in their imagination, civilian.
Yeah, exactly. The worst
it reaches absurd levels. It's like just completely divorced from anything resembling reality.
The middle section is really good on the tip that Europeans have always simultaneously savaged America and depicted Americans as these terrible colonializers, while they inevitably worship our pop culture and everything about us and know nothing about we as Americans have this inborn inferiority complex to the exalted Europeans with their little cappuccinos and their eat, pray, love and their non-existent work days where they choose not to work and everything, and their wonderful statues and culture and all of this, and like they don't fucking know anything about that. Like when I was a teenager learning about all these like European movies, no one I've ever met from over there knows about any of that. They're just watching like Minions movies. So even in 1951, I was surprised that it was the case even so early.
You go to some of these places and they know nothing about their own history. It's like the American tourists that go there, they're much more interested in the Normans or whatever else. Like you go to like Sicily, right? And it's like you can talk to some of the locals. They know some of it, but it's obviously it's obvious that they're not as interested in it as even like a casual American tourist would be, just going to visit a place and wanting to find out about it. That's something that I think really sets American culture apart, is like we do have much more of a curiosity about things and an openness to know them. Like most of the world is very closed off and provincial.
The thing that we probably our biggest shortcoming is actually about our own, sometimes and often, and I think this has political. There's a political metaphor in this too, which is that we can often be dismissive of our own people and culture. We kind of like easily will ignore or kind of just discount something as a has-been, or overlook it entirely, or consider it low class, as we not trendy enough, not hip, not fashionable. Meanwhile, it can be worshipped in Europe. And sometimes it's not just because like they're 10 years behind 2000 and late and always just, trailing us. It can be that we've just neglected gold in our own hills, and which others find and others celebrate. And that seems to be a bigger problem actually here than our neglect of the greatness of other lands, because America's often looking to import, foreign geniuses and find foreign things. It doesn't extend to all over the world. Obviously, there are vast parts of the continent of the earth that we're kind of not interested in, or nobody's really looking there. But there's a lot that is. I mean, look at the popularity of Japanese culture here.
Oh, toxic. I mean, it's really, I'm not kidding. Like, I'm not making a joke. Like, it's disturbing when you see like the young people. You go to Barnes and Noble, or like there's this particular Asian strip mall area that's always super crowded here. That's full of like what's younger than Zoomers and the ones younger than them,
Alpha.
and
Alpha,
they're
is that what they are? That's a
Yeah.
nasty
and they're just
aspiration.
these sad, warped, dysgenic monsters that are only into this trash. And I like plenty of Japanese shit. Like I even having to like say that is annoying because like you can see the problem from anywhere in America. Why are all of these young people monolithically only interested in this one specific niche country's cartoons and nothing from their own country? And it's like this deep, deep flaw in their education and upbringing that they are taught in such a way that they ignore everything American and think that there's some innate flaw and have to exoticize their interests by only watching this one type of stupid fucking cartoon and pretending that it's like the most exalted achievement in mankind. It's so disturbing to me.
I don't get
Yeah.
it. I don't. I
The
literally don't get it.
the Japan though of America for much of the rest of the world is Texas. Like there's this thing of if you go to Europe and say you're from America, they're sort of neutral in their response typically. But if someone is like I'm from Texas, they absolutely lose their mind. Like they're so fascinated by it. So
Because
I
cowboys,
yeah, I mean
Western,
I was
George
on
Bush, her.
yeah, I was on a long layover coming back from a 2 week horseback riding trip, and
You travel far too much.
2 weeks on horseback?
2 weeks on
This is,
horseback, like
you're
300
losing me
miles
with
through the
this
mountains.
2 week horse
Was this
journey.
Red
And
River?
I thought I was going to have my luggage at the layover, and the layover was in Istanbul, and they just checked it through all the way back to America. So I'm in just riding gear, and I have an overnight layover. So I go into town to get some food. I'm wearing a cowboy hat, boots, jeans, the whole 9 yards.
I mean, that's your normal getup
Yeah,
anyway.
and
That's
they're
what you're wearing every time I've seen you.
yeah, but not traveling. You know, when you've seen
Right.
them, it's been in like Texas and LA, which are cowboy towns. Anyway, uh, so I'm like walking down this really busy street, this very cosmopolitan Muslim city, and they're losing it. And I end up like I didn't pay for dinner that night because the restaurant owner came out and just like wanted a photo with me.
Well, you're a
Uh,
Well,
six
that's because you're
nine
7
Marlboro
feet
man.
tall.
You're 7 feet tall and you're dressed like the Marlboro man. You're walking down Taksim Square,
well, it's because
surrounded by
it's
little
because
tiny Turks.
it's because I was dressed like the Marlboro Man. That's the point. Is like if I wasn't
Yeah.
dressed like the Marlboro Man, then I'm just like
It's like you
okay,
fucking
everyone else.
hopped off of the billboard
But my
and
point
started
is like
walking down looking for some baklava.
I do appreciate that they picked a good at least like a very red state kind of version of American culture to like. You realize like this is what people outside the United States, what people really like about Americans. It's everything that's associated with conservatives. Uh, there's nothing about liberal Americans that really appeals in any kind of soft culture sense to the rest of the world. I mean, I would have said Taylor Swift, except she's not a liberal anymore. She's a Republican again. So there really is nothing about liberal American culture that is authentic in any way that is appealing on any kind of mass level, I guess.
Like it, we exported 2010s transgenderism everywhere, and so I think the 2010s are a case of American leftist
Yeah.
slime successfully being exported everywhere.
But the ties were doing it better before we were.
Yeah.
Like,
And he talks here too about like how happy they were, the joy they had when the Rosenbergs were executed, because it gave them the excuse to chimp out and to act like, you know, and he has a great like he like there were no limits to the absurd masquerade. 100 marching communists in London put flowers at the foot of a statue of Franklin Roosevelt with an attached red card reading, "That Roosevelt's ideas may live, the Rosenbergs must not die." Not Marx or Lenin's ideas, please note, but Roosevelt's. It is all of a piece. Julius draped after his death, not with a red flag, but with the ritual prayer shawl of the Jews. Not the Internationale sung, but Go Down Moses and the Psalms. The American flags flying brazenly over the cortege, and the rabbi to intone unbelieved-in prayers at the grave. But the hoax would not quite hold to the end, for the crowd at the funeral parlor booed when a rabbi, invited for the sake of camouflage, reminded them that the Jewish religion teaches forgiveness of enemies. In an instant, the fake piety and humanity had disappeared from the carefully prepared faces, and those who had cried for mercy a little while before hooted down the mention of its name. But there was worse yet. I was in Rome when the news of the Rosenbergs' death came through, and I can speak only of what I actually witnessed. But there, at least on the faces of the communist crowds surging and screaming before the American embassy, I saw evidence of joy. They were glad, these young activists, that the Rosenbergs were safely dead. For a little while, they had been afraid that some last-minute reprieve might cheat them out of their victory celebration, that they would be unable to go through the streets in their Sunday best, chalking up death to the killers of the Rosenbergs, and to sit afterwards over a bottle of wine, content with a good day's work. But even this is not the utterest obscenity. I'll stop reading there, but
that was
look at
one of
how
my
happy
favorite.
they were over George Floyd.
Yeah.
That was what the whole year was about. They love when they get a martyr.
And how happy they were about January 6th being their survival of a violent
Because those little
insurrection.
things that are so few and far between are all that affirms their view of the world. Like
And they're completely
they're
made up.
insulated, like, you know, eggshell view of the world so infrequently gets affirmed that they love when the rare spectacle occurs.
And they love that these two idiots, Renee Good and what's the other one, got killed trying to attack ISIS officers in these protests. This is like the greatest gift you can give to a libtard is
Martyrdom.
a fictional affirmation of their diaper baby faith.
Well, and they're also legitimately happy that a death has occurred because they're evil. They're on the side of evil. So they're happy about the literal death.
There's that too, you know, and I was talking to I won't mention any names, but you know, I happen to be like, I won't know because it's not somebody we know mutually, but like I happen to like, you know, you see, let's just put it generically. It's like how they love talking about how funny it is that Anna Hachian almost died of COVID, which is how they view it. Which is like not even, I've learned, and I won't get into details, but it's not confined to mere like shit posters. Like I heard this in the wild, somebody thinking that was so funny that that she almost died of COVID because
I mean
she wasn't even an anti-vaxxer, but that's like that's like what hovers in their head as like an amusing episode of history.
The entire 7+ years I've been doing it, they've wanted me to kill myself. I mean, literally, like that's.
And they would think it's really funny if you did.
And they would think that
they
it's
would
funny
really
and
enjoy it.
what keeps me from doing it is knowing how much satisfaction it would give them. So
yeah, exactly.
But that's what they want. I mean, that's what they wanted since day one. because
I
they
mean, you saw how
spiritually
they
sense
you
a
saw how they
problem. They don't.
immediately celebrated after Charlie Kirk died.
Oh, well, there we go. Yeah.
You
How
know,
could
I
I
mean,
forget?
it jumped right out, and you know, there. I mean, I remember seeing it when Trump got shot, and you know, there's all the people who regretted that he
Oh, yeah.
survived, and then there were all the people who, like, in the instant aftermath, when it was unclear if he was okay or not, they were already, you know, celebrating. Even people, you know, people like out in the wild. Like
Yeah.
I mean, I was in West Virginia of all places, and it was was in this like restaurant, and you know, got like a call like, "Hey, check out the news," and then the bartender, who was this had like the purple hair and this kind of thing, was just like asking about it, but then she was completely smiling, and it was the most bizarre kind of thing, because you know, there's this shock. You know, I'm like, well, the president's just been shot, and she's like gleeful, and I'm like, I'm in West Virginia. This shouldn't be happening over here. Like, I expect this in like Libtardville, but what is going on?
I mean, look at it goes as deep as it can possibly go. Look at one of the flagship liberal values. It's the assisted suicide thing, and that's
right. Yeah,
you know, when you finally get your communist health care, like in Canada, you don't get access to anything that heals you without waiting for 9 months or 2 years or whatever. But you can instantly kill yourself
same
for
day,
any reason,
like,
same day. So that's their values are death. They're the party of death.
And that's what and it's on issues like that they depend on for their sense that they are pro-freedom too, because everyone thinks that they're pro-freedom, right? And including communists. Like, if you look at their language, they all think that they were fighting for freedom, the freedom for man's liberation from capitalism and from having to work and all this stuff. Everything's about free.
The ultimate freedom is abortion. Like, that's the thing.
The sacrament.
It's the absolute pinnacle of the whole pile of it.
I don't know that they even believe. Do they even believe in? Is there any point in getting married, if not to have some abortions, in the liberal point of view?
Well, they like the torture that it exerts on one's friends and family, and the fact that it costs lots of money.
The anguish.
So the woman, the inner woman, triumphs there over the stability.
I think
they really like that. They really like that it offends people who are offended by babies being like killed in the womb. Right? It's like they get a deep sense of satisfaction, that like a Christian out there is, or any kind of good person is kind of sickened by this idea, right? It's just, they're kind of doing it for the shock, disgust value, owning the conservatives, this sort of thing.
Yeah.
I do think that we kind of have to, the big difference between now and 100 years ago is, I think, the shape shift that has occurred in the kind of communist, in the biography of the communist idea, which is not the same as it once was, because again, and this has also been whitewashed, up until the Khrushchev report, until it was literally exposed by its own government, communism meant the Soviet Union. They've done this switch since then where they talk about how, the Soviet Union wasn't really communism, and that was a particularly bad form of communism, and so that really wasn't communism at all, and neither is Cuba. They do that thing now. It's not only kind of a fake cover-up, but it's literally the opposite of what communism meant. Communism was not some sort of university concept that nobody really understood. It was very clearly understood. It was the Soviet Union. It was fealty to the Soviet Union and its foreign policy as the future and the hope of mankind. That's what it was, and that is why none of them could confess. That is why none of them could, in any way, they could neither confess to being spies nor could they disavow what they did, because in their minds, as Leslie Fiedler analyzes, in their minds, they were being loyal to their ultimate cause. And their ultimate cause was not in any way an enemy to, they couldn't view it as an enemy to their own state. To them, it was it was God. And God was the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, it was the USSR. So this faith had to be maintained until 1956 and even beyond by many. But it's an important thing for students of history to understand, because they've tried to whitewash that fact. Communism was the Soviet Union. It was the last hope, and that is why they dedicated their lives to it. Now, there is no Soviet Union anymore. So it is no longer this concrete kind of thing that you can trace it all back to. It's now back to an ideological virus that shapeshifts, that kind of can be much more easily half believed, or believed without any real. It doesn't require any commitment to believe it. You just kind of have to passively go along with it. Everyone on the left now is a communist sympathizer to one degree or another. There are no real it used to be that you had, because of the existence of the USSR, you also had anti-communist leftists who were leftists. They believed the basic ideas, the wrong ideas, but they hated the USSR for specific historical reasons, or the party that took over, or whatever, like the Trotskyists, whatever. That doesn't exist anymore. So it's kind of this one giant blob of communist sympathy and kind of like unspoken, unconcrete adoption of its general point of view on life. And I feel like the thing that it all coheres around today, which didn't exist 100 years ago, is the woman question. The female character, as one journalist, Helen Andrews, calls it, the great feminization. I feel like it's hard to talk about a little bit, because it makes it seem like we're at war with 51% of the population, but it's also impossible to ignore. It has taken the shape of this witch, of this literal witch, which it is high time we hunted. Hey, this is your host, Alec Mohibian, with a quick message before we continue. Based in that great but very troubled place, Hollywood, California, Filthy Armenian Adventures is an interdimensional travel program that takes you deep into the cultural mysteries of our time. In search of truth, in search of gold, in search of lost friends and unsung heroes, in search of John Galt's motor. This show is your antidote to the black pill. This is your guide to the places, the personalities, the ideas and creations the enemies of man don't want you to know. This is your techno-noir investigation into the good, the evil, and the God hiding under our noise. This is where you get the news before it breaks, before it blows, before it burns. The show is supported entirely by patrons at patreon.com/filthyarmenian. As a patron, you get access to twice as many adventures, including the most important ones, the ones with the real facts. Plus, regular brief smoke break spiritual reports on topics of the day. As a patron, you also get exclusive access to our Smash live events. Ask anyone who's attended one, and they will tell you it's an experience you'll never forget. It's very easy to keep Filthy Armenian Adventures alive. You can still listen to the show on your favorite app like Spotify or Apple, and you can do so with the pride that you're putting a little bit of money where your soul is. More patrons means more fuel, more topics, more investigations, more miracles, more secret locations, and forbidden territories around the world, and the world that is Los Angeles, our post-apocalyptic headquarters. It means we'll be able to track down more enchanting figures in the landscape, dare them to abandon their masks, and join our quest out of the darkness and into a golden age. Patreon.com/filthyarmenian. Thank you for being one of the good ones, and enjoy the show. And that does it for the free portion of this episode. For the second half, where we dissect the witch, the big W. Subscribe on Patreon at patreon.com/filthyarmenian. You also get twice as many episodes overall, plus 100 smoke break mini episodes straight from my heart, plus first dibs on the next live event. It's not that much. It starts at $5 a month. If you see a higher amount, you're using the Apple Store, and you shouldn't. They charge 33% more that we don't see a penny of. It starts at $5 a month. Use your browser if you have an iPhone, and subscribe and be part of this mission toward the light and out of the darkness, and to drive a stake into the heart of Big W. Patreon.com/filthyarmenian. Thank you for listening. See you on the other side of the paywall.